Welcome back everyone to more Bloodborne Chalice Dungeon expansion painting. We are carrying on with this saga of many minis that come within this expansion of the board game, and today we are turning our attention to the horrible little rat. The other week we did a dog, now we're doing a rat. The dogs and the rats are known as the worst enemies from FromSoft games. As always, we're starting off with a pot of clean water, a pot for dirty water. We have our kitchen roll and we have our wet palette. Pop on a wet palette sheet, and if it gets any crinkles or wrinkles, you can iron them out with a card or anything similar with a flat edge to it, and then we're ready to start painting. So we are indeed doing the Labyrinth Rat, one of many annoying enemies in the game, and we'll get it primed with some black ready for highlighting. Now we are doing zenithal highlighting with all of the minis that I have in these expansions, but remember you don't need to do this step. If you want to do something similar, you can do the slap chop method. There are plenty of great tutorials online about slap chop. It's basically doing what I'm doing here with the airbrush and some white ink, but you're basically doing it with a dry brush. Just dry brushing on white onto black and making sure all of these sort of higher up edges and all the protruded edges and everything like that are brightest compared to everything that's darker underneath. That's basically slap chop, but what I'm doing is zenithal highlight. Not too dissimilar, you just get smoother transitions with an airbrush. So once it is highlighted, we are starting off by painting the fleshy parts of the rat with some Guilliman flesh contrast paint. So all of these parts will be the bits that aren't covered in fur. So we've got all the horrible little bits on the body that you can see of the exposed flesh. We've got the tail, we've got the feet, we've got the mouth, the paws. Is it mouse paws? Rat paws? We've got rat paws, the face, the nose, everything that you can see without any fur on it will be painted with the Guilliman flesh contrast paint. And then once we have that done, we are then moving on to some snakebite leather, which is the really nice mid-brown contrast paint. And I'm going to be using that to base the entirety of the body of fur. It's a great mid-tone, so it allows you to add in lots of highlights and shadows into it and start mixing up lots of different colors onto the fur if you wanted to. It's just a good base coat for this kind of thing. Once we have that done, I'm using some Bugman's Glow, which is a sort of like dark, pinky kind of flesh tone. And I'll use that in all the sort of shadowy regions of the exposed flesh that we put the contrast on. Once that's done, I'm taking some Cadian flesh tone, which is a much lighter Caucasian flesh tone. And I'll use this within the center of all the flesh tones that we've already painted on, making sure that I'm not going over all of the paint that I've done, just targeting the sort of central areas with everything so it falls off into the darker tones on the sides. And then also targeting the very edges of things, anywhere where it's facing up, and on the edges of things where you can just blend into the darker tones and make sure you're getting these really nice bright highlights on all the fleshy parts. And then when it comes to the tail, I'm basically just doing like single strands within the center so that it can just blend out nicely into the darker tones like I've done with all the other flesh parts. With that part done, we're moving on to some bone colors. So we've got some Moorcast bone here, which is obviously a very nice bone color. And I'll be using that to paint this horrible exposed rib cage that's on the side here. Really just unsightly stuff on this rat. And making sure that that's all nice and coated up. And then we can do the same for the teeth, making sure that we're getting these like really unwashed browny kind of teeth. Then for the eyes, they are kind of like dead green, misty kind of eyes. So I'm going to base it with some Lauren Forest, which is this sort of like nice muted green, and painting the entirety of the eye with those. To which I can then add some Moot Green, which is this really vibrant, bright green. And I'll use that as the sort of like accentuated highlight part of the eye. And then once I've got that done, I can add in some Xandri Dust, which is a really sort of like sandy kind of color. And I'll use that in little dots and little very thin lines around the eye as just sort of like variation of color. And then for the pupil, I'll use some of this Caliban green, which is a very deep, rich green. And I'll basically just paint the pupil in with that because I think it's a really nice color for that. And that's the eyes done, so we can move back to the flesh now that it's dried. And I'll use some Kislev flesh, which is a very, very bright Caucasian flesh tone. And within the center of the Cadian flesh tone and nowhere else, I'm just painting in this Kislev flesh. It's basically just going to accentuate those really bright points of flesh in those sort of like real centralized areas, as you can see. All the very outer parts, all the edges and everything will all get this nice Kislev flesh highlight on. And it should blend really nicely into all the other deeper flesh tones that we've already built up on. Then I can just grab some Corax White, pop it onto the pupils so we get some nice little eye reflections, and then we can move on to painting some other tones of fur. So I'll start off with this Storm Vermin fur, because within the title it's a fur colour. So it's this sort of like grey browny tone, and I'll just start targeting different strands of hair, different parts of the fur, mixing in some different whites and blacks into this fur tone so we get a good bit of variation on it. Again, I'm not the best at painting fur, but this is the way that I find best works for me. And then it just breaks up that kind of monotony of just the standard brown tone that we have all over the body. And with that, we have a finished Labyrinth Rat, and that is the 4th model done from this expansion. We've got a fair few to go, so, you know, make sure to stick around for more of them. But for now, thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy today's episode, please be sure to drop this video a like. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and drop me a comment below. If you do fancy doing any extracurricular supporting of the channel, you can head over to my Patreon. The link is on the screen and in the description. So if you want to head over there and show your support that way, I greatly appreciate it. And if not, I very much appreciate you just joining me today and watching this video. And I will see you all next time for even more Bloodborne stuff. Bye bye.